How's it going, guys, and welcome to my normal mode Kerapac solo guide. This is going to be a video for beginners getting into Kerapac, and we are going to be talking about this with very low gear, and we are going to be getting into this in a very beginner friendly manner. However, this is still a boss that's going to take practice, and of course when I am doing this in the lower level gear, you need to keep in mind I have a lot of PVM experience, and of course that does make it easy for myself. So while I will be using very low gear in this video, you will want to probably have as many upgrades as possible to make this easier on yourself. I wanted to make this video as the past guides are kind of a little bit outdated, and there is some more information that we have now than a lot of those guides do have back then. So I wanted to make an updated version for you guys, and hopefully it does help you out. So without wasting much more time on the intro, let's get into this and let's talk about the requirements that you're probably going to want for this. We're going to keep them as low as possible, but we also want to keep this kind of realistic. Okay, so to start off with, I'm going to talk about the level requirements I would probably recommend. Now, I used my alt account for this, the one that I'm leveling up, as I wanted to bring myself down a little bit from being a max player just to something that doesn't have absolute best in slot stats everywhere. But I would recommend having at least 90 plus in the combat style you're wanting to use. For example, I had 97 magic, but 90 plus would be absolutely fine. You're almost definitely going to want 89 herblore. This is because you're going to want at least the basic overloads, which is what I used. At level 89, you can go to the Falador camp and use the pulse core boost to get up to 96 to be able to make yourself the basic overloads. You're going to want 67 summoning. This way you can have access to a decent beast of burden, or having any higher than this for a yak or a ripper demon would of course be pretty ideal as well. Ideally you will want 95 prayer with ancient curses, but it can be done without it, as I used my account that only has 86 prayer and it did go absolutely fine. That being said, having access to soul split and the tier 95 accuracy and damage curses will definitely be very useful. Those are the only skills that I would recommend you have to have, as that's the only ones that I did have. But that being said, if you have invention leveled up, getting some basic perks would be great. Same goes for archaeology and any relics that you may be able to unlock to help with PVM, and any higher levels than what I've suggested of course is only going to be a good thing. Okay, so moving on to gear, what I'm going to do is show you two different presets. I'm going to be using magic as my combat style, but you will be able to use range or melee as well. Just change the tier of weapons over to that combat style and replace them as you see fit, and it'll be absolutely fine. So I am using a very cheap option for my setup because I wanted to show that it is possible. However, the more expensive preset won't be overly expensive anyway, so it is still worth bringing that if you have access to it. And then of course any upgrades from here on out are just good things to bring. So for the gear, I opted to use Ganodermic armor, which is tank gear, but it is level 75 gear, and it doesn't cost very much at all. It's about 6 mil for the hat, the body and the pants, maybe even a bit less. I'm using tier 80 weapons, which is important as you are going to need the accuracy. I'm using a Virtus wand and a Virtus book. And then for the gloves and boots, I'm using celestial hand wraps, which are tier 90 but incredibly cheap. I'm using blast diffusion boots because they are 2 million GP and they are best in slot except for the upgrade. For the amulet, I'm using the Cyberman's Hiss because it gives more bonus damage than a amulet of fury does and is incredibly cheap. I'm using a Gothic cape, which is free. I am using a runic accuracy aura, but I would recommend using a maniacal aura or a reckless aura if you have access to it, as they will increase your accuracy and your damage by quite a bit, and it is going to be important for you to have that. Now, I'm using a Cyberman God book, but any God book is going to be useful, so just bring anything, a scrimshaw, whatever, anything to add a bit of extra damage with little input. As for the ring, I'm using a ring of fortune. The vigor in my inventory, I don't actually have this, it's just an image that I used, but if you do have access to the vigor, I would recommend just camping that instead of the actual fortune ring. And then if you have any better ring like a ring of death, then of course bring that and bring the ring of vigor as a switch. As for the higher tier gear, I have just upgraded my armor to subjugation. I am using tier 85 wand and orb. This is going to give me better accuracy and damage because of the accuracy increase. I'm using a ring of death, and a max cape or a skill cape would work just the same. And the other option that is going to be incredibly useful is going to be Cinderbane gloves. However, these are incredibly expensive, so if you don't have access to them, don't panic. You can still use the weapon poison, but this stacks with weapon poison, and if you do have access to these, they're going to be a great benefit to bring them, so I would recommend bringing them along. Otherwise, this would be the average gear that I would recommend you do bring, and if you have access to this, then great, you'll be in a great spot, don't worry, but you can do it in the lower gear because that's what I'm going to be using. Okay, so moving on to the inventory, we have our shield switch, which is important to bring the highest tier shield you can, as it does scale with the defensive abilities and you will need them. You have an overload, which is going to boost your stats. You have a prayer renewal to reduce your drain rate of your prayer. You have vulnerability bombs, which are definitely worth bringing because vulnerability bombs are going to increase your damage by 10%, and this is a long fight for people in low level gear, so make sure you bring these along. Adrenaline potions, absolutely a must when you're doing DPS, and DPS is important in this fight, so make sure you bring this along. Weapon poison is too good not to bring as well, so this is a weapon poison plus, which you can buy on the Grand Exchange, but it will increase your damage a hell of a lot, and you don't have to do anything except drink it once before the fight starts. Then I have the super restore potions. You probably don't need this many, especially if you have a super prayer renewal, but bringing along 2 maybe would be enough. These are just to restore my prayer points. And we have the Gothic staff, which will actually lower the defense with the special attack of Kerapac, meaning I can splash a lot less, and that is going to be incredibly important to use if you do have access to this. I would recommend getting it if you are using magic. It helps out a hell of a lot. The final thing would be, if you do have a ring of vigor, bring it along. If it's not your main ring, keep it as a switch anyway for when you use sunshine or death swiftness. Other than that, you're going to want to bring along your brews and blue blubber jellyfish and not solid food. The reason I recommend blue blubbers is because you are going to want to make sure you have your adrenaline, especially in phase 4, and these do not cost adrenaline to eat. So you will bring blue blubber jellyfish instead, and that way you can eat whenever you want and you won't bring yourself below 50% adrenaline when you badly need to use things like devotion or debilitate or reflect. This is important. This will help a lot. Trust me. Bring blue blubber jellyfish. Other than that, I have a yak which I've filled with blue blubbers as well. I don't touch that too much, but if you are learning, I would bring a beast of burden and put blue blubbers in that as well. But if you have access to a ripper demon and you are feeling comfortable, then bring that along. The brews are so you can combo eat, and that's going to help you out a lot, especially in phase 4. It is probably worth me mentioning here that I am doing this without any perks on my gear when I do the kill, so you can do it without perks. That being said, I would recommend at least having planted feet for your sunshine or death swiftness, and then anything else that increases your damage like precise or equilibrium will of course be worth bringing along. Okay, let's take a look at the kill. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to go through the kill that I did, and then I'm going to talk about the mechanics as they happen on screen, and that way I'm not overloading you with information all at once, and you can see it happening as I talk about it. Alright, so as I am getting ready for the kill here, you can see me getting my adrenaline since I don't have the crystals unlocked yet. You will want to use the crystals if you do have them, but this fight has 4 phases, and each of the first 3 phases are the same, but they increase slightly with difficulty, the final mechanic being the lightning wall. We'll talk about that as we get to it, but just so you guys are aware, there's 3 mechanics per phase for the first 3 phases, and then the last phase is a full-on 1v1 between you and Kerapac, where basically you're just doing DPS to him while tanking his damage, which increases by quite a bit as well. So you will need to use defensives. We'll talk about that as we get there. So starting out the fight, make sure you've used your overload, make sure you've used your prayer renewal, drink your weapon poison, turn on your book, turn on your aura, all of that stuff. Make sure your prayers are on, use protect from magic, and use any magic damaging boost that you can use. You're going to want to sunshine and use an adrenaline potion straight away and start DPSing as much as you can while you wait for the first mechanic. The first mechanic will start after the first few hits, and you will notice this because he will say, "I'll tear right through you," and he will lift his staff up and then he'll slam it into the ground. And if you allow this to happen, he will send an ability through you which will stun you and then send magic hits towards you from the back, which will deal a decent amount of damage, and you want to avoid this. The easiest way to deal with this mechanic is to literally just step underneath him as you saw me do. This will negate the whole thing and it will stop it from happening, and you can do this every single time, and this is the ideal way to deal with it. But should you fail, like I'm showing you in this clip here, what you want to do is just use freedom and move out of the way of the magic. You'll just have to move a few squares to the left or the right, and that way you can avoid this. So the absolute best way to deal with this is to just step underneath him when he says, "I'll tear right through you." Once the mechanic is done, just step out from underneath him, go back to doing DPS, and then wait for the second mechanic. The second mechanic will start a few hits after dealing with the first one. He will say, "You will break beneath me," and then fly up into the air. What he's going to do is slam down on top of you, and you are going to get stunned. If you allow this to happen, you are going to take a lot of damage, as you can see happening right now, but there is a couple of ways to deal with this. The first way is going to be having the fully upgraded Pontifex Signet Ring. This will just remove the entire stun altogether, but it will have to be fully upgraded and left in your bank. Otherwise, you will have to have it equipped, and it's just kind of not worth it. You miss out on an inventory slot, you miss out on a decent ring. It's just not worth doing it that way. So have it either fully upgraded or deal with it the way that I am in this video. What you're going to want to do is, as he brings his staff forwards, you want to press escape, and as he slams down, your character will jump backwards, dodging the hit. You won't take any damage and you won't get stunned. One thing to note as well is if you time this properly and you do actually pull it off, you will have your escape and your surge reset on the cooldown. You'll be able to use this again, as he is going to do this 2 more times for a total of 3 times. What I would suggest doing is, during this mechanic, pray protect from melee, as that is what he's going to damage you with, and then just make sure you try your best to dodge these attacks. If you do get stunned by one of them, just press freedom and move away, and then before the next one lands, use anticipate, and that way you can ensure that you don't get stunned again. But it will absolutely be worth your time learning the timing on this so that you can dodge this mechanic with escape, as it is going to be the best way to deal with it. You could use surge as well. It will work the exact same way as escape, except it will sometimes put you out of distance and you won't be able to damage Kerapac. So escape is ideally the best option to use. Like I say, he will do this 3 times. You'll have to dodge all 3 of them. Should you get hit by one of them, you do need to freedom and move out of the way. Otherwise, you will take rapid tick melee damage, which will also increase over time. After his 3rd dive, you just go back to doing DPS and get ready for the 3rd mechanic, which is the lightning one, which will probably be the most difficult mechanic for people to learn. Mechanic 3 is the lightning wall, and you will notice this because he will say, "Witness the power of the staff." When he does this, there's going to be a line of lightning traveling across the arena. It will cover the entire arena as it travels across. It will not leave a single space clear. You have to dodge this or use defensive abilities to deal with it. On phase 1, you will only have 1 line of lightning. On phase 2, you will have 2. And on phase 3, you will have 3. The spawn locations are random for these, and they will just go all over the place. You have to get used to surging through them, or bladed diving through them, or using defense abilities with your shield on to reduce the damage to make sure you will stay alive. Getting stuck inside these is going to deal a lot of damage, so of course the main way to deal with this is to not get stuck in them and to go through them very quickly, or to surge through them. So you will notice here that I use surge to go through the wall and I take 0 damage. That being said, it is important to note and worth mentioning that the lightning, the way it works is you can see the line of lightning, but the initial hitbox where the damage starts at the front of it is actually 1 tile in front of where the animation is. It ends where the animation ends, but you will take damage from 1 tile in front of the animation of the lightning that you can see. This just means you want to surge nice and early to make sure that you get through this before that does actually hit you. So surging through this is definitely one of the easiest ways to deal with it, but once you reach phase 2 and phase 3, it does get a little bit more difficult. If you have access to double surge, you can surge through both of them, and you can usually get through all 3 as well with a bit of practice. But for phase 2 and phase 3, what I would suggest you do, especially if you're not too comfortable dodging these yet, is to put on your shield, use reflect and debilitate on Kerapac, and then surge through the lightning. And if you do get hit by it, it's not the end of the world, as it won't do anywhere near as much damage as it should do. If you have 100% adrenaline when these 3 or 2 lightning walls come, you can also use barricade too. I sometimes tend to do this if my food is running low, or if it's on phase 3 and I do have 100% adrenaline. This will reduce all the damage to 0, or block all the damage of course, but there's one thing to mention, that you will want to do this with the time warp ability. I will talk more about the time warp ability, but what it does is basically reset your cooldowns for you. But there's one thing that's worth noting, and I want to mention this now, is if you use barricade with the time warp ability in this situation, it will look like the duration of your barricade has extended when the time warp resets. This is not the actual duration left on your barricade. It does not extend the duration. It will still be the same as what it would have been. The number just changes, and this is a bug. So if you had 3 seconds left when your time warp goes off, you will only have 3 seconds left, not the full duration that it does show. But you only have access to the time warp ability from phase 2 onwards, so we'll get to that very soon. Just ensure that you don't follow the lightning even if you do have reflect or debilitate on, as it will keep ticking damage. You want to get these out of the way as quick as possible. Use reflect, use debilitate, you'll be absolutely fine, just don't tank the hits. It is still worth practicing the surge, especially even if you do have reflect and debilitate on, then eventually you can be more comfortable and you can dodge these without using the adrenaline to use reflect and debilitate. To phase Kerapac into phase 2 and phase 3, you need to bring him below 50,000 life points. Anything below 50k will force him into the next phase. If you don't do this quick enough, he will just recycle through these abilities, so he'll go back to mechanic number 1, number 2, number 3, exactly as you just dealt with them throughout the entire fight, and he will do that through phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 as well. Okay, so you understand how the mechanics work, and they work the same through the entirety of phase 1, 2 and 3. There's just a little bit of extra things that you need to know about before you move into phase 4. In phase 2 and 3, a couple of different things do happen. First of all, when you get into phase 2, immediately you are going to have access to the special ability that we talked about, being the time warp ability. This will take a snapshot of exactly how you were when you press that button, where you are stood, where your adrenaline is, where your health is, and what your ability cooldowns are. Everything will be saved, and then after the duration runs out, you have to let it run out itself. It will put you back into that state as soon as it runs out. This means that when you press that button, you can use sunshine, you can use barricade, any thresholds, you can do absolutely anything, and it will reset as soon as you go back. This does have some exceptions, like the Staff of Armadillo and a couple of other ones, but we don't need to mention those for a beginner guide. This can be incredibly useful because from phase 2 to phase 3 onwards, it means you can get a sunshine or a death swiftness for absolutely no adrenaline cost whatsoever. So what you're going to want to do is use this either immediately as soon as you get into phase 2 if you have 100% adrenaline, or wait until he's about to use his first mechanic, which is the one where we want to walk underneath him, and then use the time warp ability. The reason you want to use it either immediately or after waiting a little bit is because if you use it at the wrong time, what's going to happen is you will use your time warp, he will use the ability, and as you try to walk underneath him, it is going to time warp you back out from underneath him, and you're going to cause that ability to go off properly. You don't want this to happen, so either use it immediately straight away, and that way the time warp will reset just before, giving you enough time to get back underneath him, or it will reset afterwards, meaning you've got plenty of time to take your time and get underneath him and avoid that mechanic. Once you've used time warp, you're going to want to use things like sunshine, get that down, make sure you spend your adrenaline, and then as soon as time warp resets, you've got 100% adrenaline again, and you can fire off as many thresholds as you would like to. It is worth mentioning that there's no point in using an adrenaline potion once you've used time warp, as it will still cost you the adrenaline potion and it will put it on cooldown, but once you time warp back, you will no longer have that effect, so there's no point in using on that while you're in the time warp. Save it for afterwards. So that is how the time warp mechanic works. There's not much else for me to tell you other than you can use this at multiple times throughout the fight. As long as it comes off cooldown, you're ready to use it. It is great to use at the beginning of each phase for the extra sunshine, but depending on your kill times, you will be able to use it multiple times throughout the fight as well, depending on whenever you actually have it available. This is something you will just have to practice with and mess around with and see when is best to use it. The next thing that's going to happen in phase 2 and phase 3 is the mechanics that he's used are going to get more difficult because they're going to have clones. For example, you know on phase 3 and phase 2 that there is an extra lightning per phase. For the first two mechanics, there is something similar as well. For the first mechanic, Kerapac will remember the location that he fired out the ability to, and it will continue on for the next phase as well. So if you didn't dodge this ability by walking underneath him, this means you will have 1, 2, and 3, depending on which phase, lines of damage coming towards you from behind in different locations, as it will fire out from the last location on the last phase as well. However, if you are walking underneath him and you do get this every time, you will not see anything change throughout phase 1, 2, and 3 for this. So just get used to walking underneath him. It is the easiest way to do this. As for the second mechanic, where he jumps into the air and dives on top of you, there are going to be clones that are doing the exact same as what he did in the previous phase. So for example, during phase 1, he is going to jump to 3 specific locations. In phase 2, there will be a clone jumping to those exact same locations that he jumped in phase 1, but Kerapac will be going to you himself, meaning you can move into a different location and he will still follow you there, of course. The clone will stay where it was in phase 1, so you can just move to a different area of the arena and just stay away from that clone. In phase 3, he will do the exact same thing again. You will have 2 clones, one of which is going to be the same one from phase 1, going in the same location as before, and then again another one from phase 2, which is going the exact same locations that he did the dive in phase 2. Again, just move to a different location of the arena and you don't even need to worry about these. It's not that big of a deal. Just move away from where they are and you'll be absolutely fine. Put simply, these clones will not follow you. They will stay where they were in the previous phases. Other than that, that is the only difference between phase 2 and phase 3. There is nothing else different. You still need to get him below 50,000 life points, and then once you've done that in phase 3, you will move into phase 4. I'm not going to talk about the lightning again because I've already explained how to deal with that in phase 2 and phase 3, and that works exactly the same as mentioned before. So now let's move on to phase 4. Okay, so phase 4, one of the phases that a lot of you are going to find really easy and a lot of you are going to find really difficult. It depends on how comfortable you are with defensive abilities and eating and all that sort of stuff, but trust me, you'll get through this nice and easily. I will explain it in a way that you will get through this. I promise. You will be able to do this. Don't panic. A lot of people get struggled on this phase and they give up, and trust me, you can do it. So don't freaking give up. You've listened to me ramble on for about 15 minutes. You're not going back now. Okay, so phase 4, the simplest way to think of this is there are no mechanics. The only thing that happens is Kerapac will hit you a lot harder, more like a truck smacking you in the face, and then also you are going to want to use defensive abilities with your shield to get through this nice and easily. You just need to do DPS to Kerapac. He's just going to want to do DPS to you. And when people say the easiest way to kill a boss is to kill the boss before he kills you, that is literally what this phase is. You just need to kill him before he kills you. That is it. So all you're going to want to do is make use of your defensive abilities and get through this phase nice and easy. That is the simplest way to put it, and now I'm going to tell you how to do that. You will still have access to the Time Warp special ability. You want to make use of this during this phase. The reason being is you can use Time Warp and then use Devotion, and then as soon as your character Time Warps back again, you can use Devotion again. So you do allow yourself to get 2 devotions. You also want to use your shield to use things like Reflect and Debilitate as well. If you use Debilitate with a shield on, the duration lasts longer, by the way, so it is absolutely worth using this with your shield on and stacking these with Reflect. Make sure you use Resonance too, and make sure you use Preparation if you do have your shield on anyway. That way your Resonance will come off cooldown a lot quicker. You want to cycle through using Reflect and Debilitate, Resonance and Devotion, and if you absolutely have to, you can use Time Warp and use Barricade or use Immortality. Barricade will block all the damage, and if you've used Time Warp, you can use it twice in a row. And Immortality is going to reduce the damage you take, and if you do die while under the effect of Immortality, you will come back to life with a certain amount of health, and you can use Immortality again once the Time Warp has run out. This phase will take some practice. I'm making it sound easier than it is. For someone who is getting used to defense abilities, you are going to need to practice this, but you will get there. Trust me, it is not something you need to stress about. Don't panic, and make sure you eat when you need to eat. You have a full Beast of Burden full of blue blubber jellyfish, and this is why you brought blubber jellyfish. You want to have adrenaline. If you don't have enough adrenaline to use your thresholds, which is 50% adrenaline, you are going to struggle big time. So the reason you use blubbers is because you can munch on those the entire phase 4 if you need to. You can just keep eating them and it will not affect your adrenaline or stop you attacking or anything along those lines, meaning you can use your defensive still. and you can munch the crap out of your blubber jellyfish. Use a devotion, fully heal up. You won't lose any adrenaline. Use reflect, fully heal up. There's no reason not to. You have enough of these and you should be able to get through this without using all of your food. If you did have sharks or rocktails or anything like that, every time you eat, you're losing 10% adrenaline, and eventually you're going to be eating so much that you do not have enough adrenaline to use reflect and debilitate or devotion or anything along those lines. The problem with this is if you have no adrenaline to use those, you're going to be taking more damage, which means you're going to be eating more, which means you are not going to be building your adrenaline up. You see what's going to happen here if you don't have blubbers? Trust me, blubbers are the way to go in this situation. So what I would tend to do is as soon as I get into the fight, I will use my time warp ability once I reach 100% adrenaline, and I will drop my sunshine with this, and then I will use an adrenaline potion. Now I know I said before, do not use an adrenaline potion while you are under the effects of time warp. However, this situation can be a bit different because if you use an adrenaline potion here and then you can build back up to reflect or devotion, you can use one of those before the time warp expires. That way you can get a double reflect or a double devotion along with having your sunshine available too. If you aren't comfortable doing this and if this isn't working for you, just use your defensives. Don't worry about the sunshine, just do as much damage as you can. Remember your vulnerability bombs. Remember to make sure your overload is still active, as this could be further in the fight, and just focus on using those defensives. Start off with reflect and debilitate, and then once that's expired, use a resonance, and then use the time warp and use your devotion. And then once that devotion's run out and the time warp is reset, use devotion again, and then by the time that's expired, you should have reflect and debilitate ready again. Make sure you use preparation when your shield is equipped so that your resonance comes back. Use resonance whenever you can. If you have the concentration to do so, take your prayer off when you use resonance. That way you will heal a hell of a lot and it'll save you a lot of food. And then from here on out, just keep your shield on, use your defensives, and DPS Kerapac down. For someone who is struggling with this phase, I can promise you, you will absolutely be able to get through this nice and slowly if you just keep that shield on and you keep rotating these abilities. You will be absolutely fine. Make sure you use anticipate as well. That reduces another 10% damage, and just keep at it. You will get through it. You can reduce the amount of food you use down to 0 if you use the abilities in the correct order. I'm not saying that you definitely have to be able to do that, because that's not me being condescending or anything. I'm just saying that you'll be able to get through this, so don't worry about it. You got this. Once you've done enough damage to him and he is dead before you, then you will get your drop, and congratulations, you defeated Kerapac in normal mode. That brings us to the end of this guide, and I hope it was helpful. I wanted to make this, like I say, to update it and also kind of deliver it in a different sort of style, which of course I hope would be useful for you guys. I know it's been quite long, but for you guys that want to go back through the video, there of course will be timestamps for each and every section, so you can revisit the bits that you need to visit. Anyway, like I say, I hope it helped, and I hope you do get very lucky with your drops here. If you have any questions, go down to the comments and ask any questions that you do have whatsoever. I will answer as many as possible. I will do my best to reply to every single comment on this video for as long as YouTube notifies me about the comments. Also, my Discord is linked in the description. Feel free to join that, and you can send me a DM with any questions that you have as well, and as soon as I get a chance, I will reply to you and I will help out as best I can. Don't worry if you are thinking you may just be a nuisance. You're not. Just ask any questions. It's fine. I will take the time if I can to answer any questions that you have. Other than that, guys, do leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, if it did help you out. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Thank you so much to the channel members for the extra support that you guys provide each and every day. Your names have been on screen right now, of course, and it's very much appreciated. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching. Good luck at Kerapac, and I'll see you all in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye.